In our next segment, now this one gets a little heavy. Just fair warning. This is something that I don't necessarily enjoy talking about, but it is important to know how recent events are not only changing perceptions in terms of electoral politics, but also our culture in terms of just democratic politics. So, what I mean by that is that everything stemming from the Swalwell scandal, okay? So, Congressman Eric Swalwell, if you've heard, was running for the governor of California to succeed Gavin Newsom. Now, it's a very crowded primary, so are tons of candidates in that race right now. And believe it or not, the top two candidates may actually be two Republicans based on polling. And in California's jungle primary, any two candidates from any party who receive the most votes then proceed to the general election. So in this case, we actually might see at least one Republican in the general election come November, if not two. So with that said, this is a very competitive and contentious primary already. So now leaning into what had happened, just giving you the straight facts. Number one, over the past several years, at least since the mid-2010s, there have been rumors of inappropriate behavior and relations with Congressman Eric Swalwell and staffers who are employed by his office in Congress. So highly inappropriate, number one. Two, my heart goes out to anyone who's been made to feel uncomfortable or has had just gross interactions and then more so have been victims of his predatory behavior. So my heart goes out to all those who were affected, victims, their families, their inner circles, because they're going through a lot right now, especially with this national attention on something that they shouldn't have never had to ever go through in the first place. So with that said, on Friday, April 10th, the news had dropped that Congressman Eric Swalwell had not only inappropriate relations, it wasn't even relation because it was predatory violations, okay? Predatory behavior of assaults against former staffers. At the time of Friday, apparently it was two. Now, with that said, there were more victims who were impacted by this and were trying to actually work behind the scenes with influencers, actually with Democratic and political influencers, but not even influencers, people who are actually involved in politics, not only California politics, but national politics in Congress. So the fact that we have people with platforms working with victims so they can stay protected, get connected to people who can actually, where they can share their stories safely, but then also hold Congressman Swalwell accountable, right? All of this was going on behind the scenes, like up until Friday. I shouldn't say until Friday. Friday happened, news dropped, and it was like end of the day, toward the end of the week's media cycle. So this was just bad news heading into the weekend. Then on Saturday, Eric Swalwell had posted a video sharing, pretty much claiming his innocence, saying these allegations are categorically false, they're lies, blah blah blah. But he did apologize to his wife for putting her in the situation. But we also know he's totally saving face. Like it came across like a strong apology in terms of, or I shouldn't say apology. It came across like a strong he definitely didn't do it. But when you start to see the evidence and hear the stories of the victims, he is just fighting so hard to grasp for straws for any ounce of credibility left, because his career, his life is done. And that is because that on Sunday, Saturday, from Friday into Saturday, April 10th into 11th, 21 of the members of Congress and elected officials who endorsed Eric Swalwell were starting to rescind their endorsements one by one. Even the Working Families Party rescinded their endorsement from Eric Swalwell Friday into Saturday. And then by the end of Saturday, there were more calls for Eric Swalwell to drop out of the governor's race. That was first, right? Just to drop out. Then by Sunday, not only did Swalwell finally drop out of the governor's race, but then there were more victims who had come forward. First it was 2, then it was 4. Now there's momentum gaining. And what I mean by momentum is that more people felt safely confident to share their stories and speak out because obviously Swalwell needs to be held accountable. So not only that, but then even a congresswoman on the Republican side, she even called out saying that she is open to getting Congressman Eric Swalwell expelled from Congress. Okay, so really doing a number and making sure that he could be held accountable for his inappropriate actions. Just completely removed from the governing body. Then by Sunday, Eric Swalwell had dropped out. And then by Monday, there were calls for him to resign from Congress because we knew that if there was calls for him to be expelled, which we knew there was definitely momentum gaining from Democrats and Republicans to expel Eric Swalwell. Now, here's the other thing. Stepping outside of the scandal real quick, there are 4 potential members of Congress who could be expelled. Now, 3 of them, all men, 2 Republican and Eric Swalwell, the one Democrat, would have all been expelled from inappropriate relations, pretty much predatory behavior, gross assaults with women. Republican Tony Gonzalez, his inappropriate relation with a former staffer was so bad that she had committed suicide by burning herself to death. Like, just to think that level of like power that Gonzalez had over this poor innocent woman, like she thought the only way out was to kill herself. And that is just so heartbreaking. So with that said, we can't take these stories lightly. Like we really have to, treat them with the respect and dignity that the victims deserve. And that's why holding these horrible men accountable is of the utmost importance. The other Republican, Corey Hines, I believe, he actually also had he was also, predatory behavior with other women in his life. So really just disgusting to see that this was going on, Democratic side and Republican side. And then, of course, Swalwell, fast forward, like at the time of this recording, right, and the news keeps changing, the time of this recording, right, not only had Eric Swalwell abused and even just like assaulted so many women, but now taking it a step further where we have learned details of it was not consensual. It was when the women were passed out, so not even conscious. And apparently this aggressive behavior has been going on for years, even in 2019. After the Me Too movement, right? We knew Me Too movement started in 2017, more momentum 2018. So the fact that this was happening even at a time when Democrats and liberals were so focused on, holding men accountable and treating women with more dignity that they deserve. To the fact that like this was going on behind the scenes. Meanwhile, the party he's running for was upholding those values, but he clearly wasn't. So really disgusting to see that Eric Swalwell has really fallen from grace, and he's like career done, life over. Just please go away. He needs to be held accountable. Like obviously held accountable in the courts, whatever they will find him guilty of all this insanely wrongdoing behavior. So that will have to take its course. Which, mind you, even the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, is investigating this. So Congress plans to investigate this. Alvin Bragg plans to investigate this, all for Eric Swalwell's bad behavior, inappropriate, horrible behavior. More victims are coming forward, which is great. So end of the day, now that we have 4 members of Congress potentially being expelled, including Cherfilus-McCormick, where she is a congresswoman out in Florida who hers wasn't on the same level. Hers was actually fraud, where she was, her as a congresswoman, her office received funds from FEMA, right? FEMA is usually used for natural disaster relief funding. So they cut a check to Congresswoman Cherfilus-McCormick. She didn't use the money. So instead of returning it, she wound up like, quote unquote, donating it to several people she knew, right? She had connections with these different like groups who she knew the people. Granted, these groups all, knew her. So like, yes, they got the money all divided up. So it's like, oh, what's the big deal if she just gave the money to people who needed it? Well, catch is those people who were, who had the money, those people wound up donating that money back to her campaign for reelection. So it was just a cycle of her using government funds, splitting it amongst people, and then have those people donate it back to her for her reelection campaign. That level of just like mischievous, sneaky, like honestly, it doesn't matter what party or what gender or like what type of like identity politics aside, like anyone who does that is bad. like the fact that like she just took the money instead of returning it to the government, she just used it for herself and like tried to be like sneaky about it. With the digital age, like everyone's got receipts. Like what was she thinking? So really disappointing to see that came from a Democrat. But that's why you need to support Elijah Manley. Elijah Manley has been running for office consistently in that area of Florida, and now he is the most formidable challenger to take her down after she was found guilty of this ethics violation. So please support Elijah Manley in that district out in Florida. And we deserve better transparency, more credible, more like principled leaders, right? People who actually uphold their morals, like have great values, but then more so like have trust with the people. Like they build that trust and they keep that trust. They honor that trust. Like the responsibility of being a member of Congress is not just like, it's not like you won the lottery, like, hey, good luck, like enjoy. Like, no, you really have to take your role seriously. And it's a shame that those 4 members of Congress all deserve to be expelled. But it turns out Congressman Eric Swalwell did resign from Congress earlier this week, so he can't be expelled now because he's formally out. But he can still be investigated. So with that said, really hoping that the victims get the accountability they deserve, especially justice. And then in terms of just what this means for politics moving forward, right? Like the Democratic Party has to uphold these values, especially if they're drawing contrast from the Republican Party, where their head honcho, President Trump, literally has never been held accountable for his bad actions. Sure, he had the defamation lawsuit with Jean Carroll, I believe, but like at the end of the day, right, like he's still in power. He still never actually like had to, make amends with any of his bad behavior or even acknowledge that he has caused so much harm. So with that said, Democrats really have to like hold the line on this and like really push for better leaders. And then with California, now that Eric Swalwell was the front runner in that Democratic primary, more candidates are now kind of rising to the top, right? Is this Barcera? He was one of the top contenders, like top 5-ish. Also, former Rep. Katie Porter, she was also in the top. And then now even billionaire Tom Steyer. He was, I think, top 3 or 4, but now he's kind of rising to the top. So I have no stake in that game. I wish California voters the best of luck. Hopefully that more Democrats drop out or they consolidate around like someone who, they think can like take on the Republicans in the general election, should at least one Republican get in because of the volume of voters. Let's put it that way. So at the end of the day, hoping the best for California voters. And again, hate to see how this has happened with Eric Swalwell. And, I personally apologize because I did support him on this podcast, really thinking he would be a great governor, a great leader. End of the day, I wasn't the only one who was fooled, who really thought he was a good guy. He was saying the right things. He was fighting the good fights. And, it's just a shame that I fell for it. I know a lot of people did. So now it just means like we have to be a little more critical, even maybe hypercritical. I hate to say it, but just of the people we're really, trying to support. So at the end of the day, I do believe in California. Democracy will prevail. This is why we have primaries. May the best candidate win, and we will keep you updated on the results of the Democratic primary in California happening in June. So make sure that your registration is updated, that you're ready to vote, because believe it or not, you'll be voting, if you live in California, very, very soon. And for the rest of us, make sure that you are, staying informed and involved, because that is suitable for democracy. Thanks so much for watching. I know the content of this episode was heavier than usual, but I do appreciate you taking the time to listen, to hear the facts, and just learn about what's going on. And listen, if you like what you hear and you want to learn more, then make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks again so much for watching. I always appreciate your support. And we have more segments to get through, so follow along for the next part of this episode.